Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Larissa Licha on the pod. She is the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Joyn. It's Joyn. And we talk a lot about her journey, kind of going from being, from Germany, moving to the US, and then her journey in tech as an employee, quickly growing up the ranks across both product and customer-facing roles, and she, during her time there, met her current co-founder, but they also identified an opportunity to simplify the communication channels between product and sales and customer success, and that's what kind of birthed the business Joyn. I'll let her explain on the podcast exactly what the product is, but we talk a lot about her journey, kind of making that leap from being an employee to being a startup founder, not having a steady income, not having insurance, et cetera, and kind of what it took for her to make that jump. So super fascinating episode, especially because we're recording this in April. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy, so it's really cool to get her perspective on what she's doing as a startup founder, but also what she's hearing from her customers. So let's get Larissa on the pod.
Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon.
All right, Larissa, thank you for being on the podcast. Happy to have you on here.
Happy to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I guess let's kind of start things off. Give people a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, well, I'm Larissa, as you mentioned. I'm one of the founders of Joyn. I'm based in Brooklyn, but lived in a lot of different places in the US, the South, the Midwest, the West Coast, now East Coast. Originally from Germany, though, but came to the US 19 years ago for the first time, and I've been here for a decade. And then, founded our own company around 2 years ago now, coming from, I started my career in tech in customer-facing teams, moved into product, and then really owned product operations and strategy at my prior organization, and realized there's a lot of friction between product technical teams and customer facing teams. So with Joyn, we sort of focused on bridging sort of the gap that exists between those teams through like a tool that sits on top of their stack, extracts relevant context, and keeps them informed on the most important things that impact them, whether that's for product prioritization or customer expectation setting. So been doing that now for a couple of years. And I think that's me in like a high level.
No, that's great. And I guess before we jump into Joyn and kind of digging into exactly kind of what it looks like, how did you, I always like to understand people's origin stories and how they start businesses or jump into being an entrepreneur and all of that. So walk through a little bit of your early career and how you, and did you identify the problem in your previous job that you were like, okay, this is a problem that nobody's solving and I'm the right person to do it? Like maybe walk us through that process.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of like entrepreneurship, my grandma and my mom were both business owners. So I think I always had an example of the women in my family sort of like doing their own thing successfully. And I think I always was somebody that went against the stream, which Germans don't appreciate that much, which is probably why I left. But actually before working in tech, I was a tattoo artist and I had a metal band. So I was actually completely unrelated to what I'm doing now. But then I had a huge life event, which was sort of like, what am I doing here? And really forced me to revisit, and ended up in tech, I don't know, 14, 15 years ago. And I was always somebody that really liked extremely complicated issues. Like I was always naturally drawn to that, whether that was operationally, technically or in people management, like anything that was just really hard to do, I wanted to do. So I think that allowed me to make pretty quick career progression, but also move through a lot of different departments. And then 10 years ago, well, nearly 11, I met my co-founder at our prior company, which we were able to work a lot on our machine learning and AI aspects. And we got really obsessed with, again, solving meaningful problems that are really, really hard to solve for, which is how we ended up working on like causal machine learning and causal inference for the business. But I think for us, it allowed us to understand we really care about the outcome of what we're building. We really care about the customer, and we really care about the team that we're building. So I think that was like more of a starting point. At some point, I think we want to do something together. And then, yes, in my last role, sort of realizing for me to understand what's happening in R&D and translate that to CS and sales at scale was basically impossible. There was like 200 Slack channels, endless Kanban boards in Jira, endless tickets, endless PRs in GitHub. It was just impossible to actually know all the moving pieces. So no matter how well you do, things always fall through the cracks. And that really impacts customer facing teams because they don't just care about the big pillars, they care about the small stuff impacting their customers. But we just couldn't figure out a great way, even with headcount, to do this at scale in a way that was really personalized. So as like with sort of the advances in machine learning and AI that we're at now, and also with the amount of data we can handle and in what format we can handle it, we just saw like an opportunity to come in and solve this, also knowing that those teams are massive cost centers, simultaneously care about customers, and which are really revenue impacting. So getting those teams in lockstep is really critical. But because they sit in different tools and speak different languages, it's really hard to do, even with the best operators sitting at the intersection. So that was sort of the motivation behind what we're doing with Joyn now.
And did you guys kind of come up with this idea around Joyn and this kind of intersection kind of platform while at your previous job? And then you're like, hey, I'm going to cut the cord and go do this? Or like, how did that kind of, I'm always curious about the break point, right? Some people are like, burn the bridges, burn the boats. Like, I'm just going to go all in. Some people kind of started as a side hustle until it becomes the main hustle and all that. Like, where did you and your co-founder land on that?
It was totally a side hustle. And actually what we initially did was completely unrelated to what we're doing now. I was like solving a different, well, it was like related, but different on how we approached it. And it was because we didn't think about it as like this will be like a venture-backed startup. You know, we were like, this will just be something we do on the side that's fun, you know?
Okay.
And it was like an outlet too for us. Like we've been both at the company for a long time. So it was like just sort of something like fun to do. But then, we started working with some companies and we saw that we keep getting pulled into this direction. So we're like, maybe this is something we should listen to. Maybe there is something there where this friction exists. And we've felt this, we've lived this, both having been in customer facing teams and in product. We've solved it or tried to solve it manually in the jankiest ways, whether it's through Zapier or trying to make Asana automations work. Like we've desperately tried to solve this. So we're like, okay, we get pulled into this. We have expertise in this. And then also it was like, at the time too, where all the companies were like reshuffling and restructuring because of COVID. And I think I was just tired, honestly. I was like, I really appreciated my previous company, but I was so exhausted and I just needed something else. So with this pull, I was like, let's just do it. And I was like the first one that went full-time on the business, then our tech lead, and then Kendra joined when we got accepted into Techstars. And that's when we then went like all in. This is what we do now.
I'm curious about that shift from W-2, kind of steady work that is kind of what's going to happen, to then, jumping into the deep end of being an entrepreneur and a founder, mindset-wise and kind of almost like foundationally. Did you have to set yourself up to be like, okay, I need to save a lot of money to give myself runway because we may not be making a ton of money as a full-time, startup founder? Or was it just like, screw it, I'm going to figure it out and jump in with both feet? I'm just kind of curious how that process went.
It definitely factored in. Kendra and I actually talk about this a lot because we're both very financially risk averse. Okay. And it comes obviously from how we grew up. Like I grew up with a bipolar mom where she'd spend a lot of money on unnecessary things where I had to like go to the companies and the lawyers and like try to resolve these things.
Got it.
So I have had like I'm like a squirrel. I like stash money away. I didn't even have a credit card until last year, which is like, I know it's like unheard of because America credit scores, it's a whole thing. To me, it's a really weird concept. And then now think about like raising money from investors, like asking people for money. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we don't do this where I'm from. So it was hard. I think also, like not having insurance and it's very, very scary to take on these like risks. I definitely was in a position where I squirreled away a lot of money. Well, enough money to give me some breathing room. But like, we don't come from wealthy families. We don't have wealthy people in our lives that, write us a huge check and like we're off with it. We don't have that foundation. So our savings were things we accumulated like over our careers that also were things, like you think about like a house, a family, etc. Like there was definitely these thoughts around it. I think for me, the scariest thing actually was the insurance piece because it's just really scary to think what could happen if something were to happen if you don't have insurance. So I would say it was scary. And that initial step is the scariest on like, oh, you're really saying bye to the salary, the insurance. And, I was valued at the company. I knew I was secure at the company. But I think in the end, as soon as I went full time, and actually I have my journal entries from that, and I just recently read back on that. I don't know why. But as soon as I left, I felt so relieved. And it's so true that I was really afraid that the financial fear would make me less focused and having a job where I have financial stability. That was not true. I was so much more focused because I feel like it lit a fire under our butt. I'm like, we got to make this thing work because like our livelihood depends on it. And now we have people on payroll. Right. And that obviously creates even more like urgency and like pressure. So I do think, yes, it's still something that wears on our minds sometimes on like, we could be working at Pinterest making, I don't know how much money, but it wouldn't fulfill us. So there is a trade-off. And obviously I think there's always a cutoff on like, if it really were to hurt you financially to a point where there's no return and you can't get the business where it needs to be, whether it's from a revenue perspective or raising the funds, then you need to like reevaluate. So Kendra and I have frequent check-ins on these things. And we very openly talk about things that make us nervous. Yeah. Like right now, a lot of things are making us nervous because we're probably living in one of the most uncertain times, even more uncertain than COVID was in a lot of ways. So I think is a constant conversation. It's a hard step. I think it's a very personal choice. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's whatever gives you the best focus to run the business. And if you don't have the financial savings and you have dependents you need to take care of, I don't think those founders should be scrutinized to that they have a job that pays them, right? So I think it's a very personal and hard choice oftentimes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think some people are very risk averse like myself, and it sounds like you are as well. And other people are more, I'll figure it out. And if I don't, I'll go do something else. And they, take a lot more risk in their lives. And I think both paths are right for the right people, right? I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm curious about the dynamic having a co-founder, because I've talked to a lot of founders and sometimes they are the kind of the main founder, or maybe they've got some kind of early employees that they give partner or get some equity into and all that. But it seems like you guys are pretty, lockstep in this. How is that dynamic between the two of you? Are you guys exactly opposite where one's like the visionary, one's like the operations person? Or are you very similar? And also, how do you kind of break up the company kind of duties now that you guys have employees and you're scaling?
Yeah, I mean, one benefit that we do have is obviously that we worked together for many years before this. So we sort of had the opportunity to like learn each other. And I think where I am very execution focused. And I think I used to be to a point where it was a little unhealthy, like as in, we got to get this done. I don't care what trade-offs we have to make. And I had very little patience for people that didn't feel that urgency. And I think Kendra is very good at being like, hold up. We got to also understand these people have a working style. They're motivated in different ways. So like she was a good way to like rein me in and sort of like look at it more from like an empathy lens as well. But I also think at times you need to just do something. Like you just need to get shit done, And I think that's where I can take over, where Kendra can maybe be a little too lenient with people sometimes. And give people too much of a break where I'm like, nope, that's it. Like, I'm going to have this conversation, right? So I think we're very complementary, where maybe I'm going overboard on execution. She reins me in, gives me perspective. And then if she's sort of too lenient, I jump in and like make sure that, no, we're getting this thing done. So I think that's where we're complementary. I really like data and architecture and infrastructure. And like, again, the puzzle pieces on how does this architecture like fit together to do the thing. And Kendra really loves customer experiences and UX. And we have like a really good way of taking something highly complicated, but simplifying it in a customer experience that's easily understood. And I think that's where we're like very complementary as well. And then I love legal. She likes accounting. Perfect. I don't want to do accounting. I'll do our financial models, sure, but I don't want to do taxes. So she does that. I'm dealing with lawyers, and that's fine. So I think that's also like the more boring admin stuff where we get it. And then in more day-to-day, I do a lot of like the sales, go-to-market, fundraising, but then also jump into engineering as needed. But she's driving, the existing customer relationships, product inputs, roadmap, day-to-day sort of like engineering stuff. But each of us moves into one or the other as needed. Like as I'm raising, she's doing sales, right? Because that's just what happens. Right. So, we don't have any, I'm not doing sales. There's no such thing. Like anyone at the company, even our data engineer, if I would tell her you're doing sales now, she would do it. Right. Would it be her favorite? No, but she would do it. Because I think we all know, like we're a small team. There are no boundaries of roles in that way. Like we have to do whatever is best for the business. And we all are accountable and responsible in that way.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the kind of interesting things about working in a startup versus working in a bigger company is that you need to find people that are not bound by their job description, right? That typically the last bullet on every job description is like other duties as assigned. And that is no more true in a startup. And so I think if you get people that are like, whoa, it's out of my scope, out of my job description, not my job kind of mentality, probably not the right fit for an early stage startup, because you need to take out the trash some days, right? You need to jump on a customer call and et cetera, et cetera. So that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about the company and the product, because obviously you gave a high-level overview in the very beginning, but if you can simplify it for me to understand kind of what you're solving, that it sounds like a lot of companies are solving poorly or with not maybe not the best solution out there, and maybe Joyn is kind of that mousetrap that they need to kind of sync these things together. So maybe give a little bit more deeper kind of deep dive into the actual functionality and how it helps.
Yeah. And I think I will say what we learned really is like each team is really trying their best. Like you usually have product and engineering writing release notes or product updates, or they're presenting slides. Like usually they try to do a lot of communication. It's like a Slack release channel where they describe things. Like there is all this stuff they do. And simultaneously on sales and CS, usually somebody curates a list of top priorities coming from customers, things they're hearing, they're stitching ARR to it, or they have like some sort of feature request board and they're trying to give context. So I actually think both teams are trying their best to keep each other informed. And it's a lot of overhead. Like the amount of time people spend doing this, like even the weekly status update that are written for like executives, it's a lot, right? Because there's so many moving pieces, but something's still missing, right? Because like CS and sales still says product is a black box. We don't know how they make decisions. They release things, don't tell us about it, and we can't set customer expectations. And then product on the other side is like, sales always says this is this X, Y, and Z contract, and then it's not. Or, CS says this, but we also have these 60 priorities. So they don't know how this stacks up against what's already there, right? So as much as people try, I think there's like a critical one translation layer missing between these teams. Like engineering doesn't speak sales and sales doesn't speak engineering. And that's okay. It's just like different ways of operating and speaking. But then there's also just context is so scattered, right? Like it's like, okay, support can follow a Jira ticket, but really there's all this chatter in maybe 3 engineering channels. And then there's the stuff happening in GitHub that they're not looking into. So you always have impartial context, even if we're thinking about a customer prioritization. You have Gong, you have Salesforce, you have Gainsight, you have Slack channels with customers, you have emails, you have all of these things, right? It's like you're doing your best, but with maybe 10% of the total information that's there. And because of that gap, I think there is this product doesn't really trust CS and sales to make a call, and then CS and sales doesn't ever feel informed on product. But for both teams to do it, it's just not humanly possible. Like one of our customers, they're like a 300-person company. We're plugged into a subset of their Slack channels. We're in all their GitHub repos, Jira boards, and we're getting Slack opportunity account and task data. And they have 30,000 events every week. Like, how would you, even as like the best operator in the world, actually keep track of all this stuff? So things will fall through the cracks, and that's just the way it is. But it's actually really harmful because that means you're always reactive. It's really hard to be proactive. So for Joyn, I think our biggest thing has been like, yes, we want to have these teams actually be informed in this really personalized and curated way. So if you're in CS, you know exactly what's impacting your book of business right now that's happening in product and engineering. If you're in product and engineering, you know exactly what recurring and new things are happening in customer signals, which segments they're in, which ARR they're in. So we want to give you the information, but most of all, we want you to be proactive and get ahead of stuff and not be constantly firefighting. And I think that's really what, again, we focused on with the product now.
And so is the product kind of almost sitting behind like a Slack and a Jira and all these things to kind of gather all of these communications that are going out and then organize them in a way that provides each side of the equation real-time kind of curated lists or summarized lists of kind of what's happening? So, if CS wants to know like what product releases are coming out, instead of going back through all the Slack channels and trying to find it themselves, you can like ask Joyn, or Joyn will already have it. Like, is that kind of how it kind of functions in a very simplified way?
Yeah. And we focus really on us proactively telling people versus you having to ask us. But yes, what you said is, we're sitting on top of these tools. We extract the context. We give you both things, like one, known work. So for example, you have a big product feature that's being worked on. You can tell us about it and we'll keep you progressing. Or it's our trends. So these are things we're auto detecting. And that's really where it's like things that we're seeing bubble up. And those are more your discovery bucket, right? Like maybe the unknowns where like, whoa, I didn't know that we had this issue, or whoa, I didn't know customers kept asking for this integration. And then you can follow the topic and start getting updates on it as well. So you can continue kind of like being informed on it. But we're pushing all of that stuff proactively into Slack. And then, for the CS sales rep, it's like mapped to their book of business, and it gives them both things that, they might tell us, hey, I want to know how this feature is progressing. Or it's like, hey, we actually see this bug is impacting your customer. Or, hey, this feature that is like in review right now with engineering and supposed to get deployed Thursday, that impacts these customers. So they're proactively informed on it in a language as well that makes sense to them. And I think that's also such a big piece around what is really the context and information at what level that people needed. Because if you're the CEO, you really don't care about like all the nitty gritty small stuff on everything, but maybe you care about the nitty gritty on the number one company priority, right? Like then you might want to like dig deeper. But like there is again this level of curation that we're doing that tells us sort of, hey, this is what you should know about, or hey, here's the update on the thing you told us you want to stay informed on.
Interesting. So each team is still continually using the various communication channels that they were using. Joyn just kind of aggregates, digests, and then recommunicates it in a better way with context for each user base. Is that?
Yeah, I think our biggest thing is that we're cross context, right? It's like we're Slack plus GitHub plus Jira plus Salesforce. And I think that's what most tools are missing, where sort of what I pointed out earlier on is like, yeah, you can follow a bug ticket in Jira, but there's actually context in Slack and there's context in GitHub that's not reflected in the ticket. So we actually make sure that we have a holistic context across all the systems that you're using. And the other benefit as well is that support actually no longer needs access to Jira because they no longer need to follow any tickets. And product and engineering no longer needs access to Salesforce or Zendesk to look up customers or their ARR. So it's also like we're making sure this information is bridged. You work the way you work. Like you don't have to change anything. You don't have to mess with Salesforce. You don't have to mess with Jira, which are tools you don't want to be in anyway because they're pain for you. They're great for engineering, not great for support. They're great for, sales. They're not great for product. So like that's really, again, where I think our biggest differentiation is like the cross-context awareness. And then, yes, curating it and pushing it to where you're already working so you don't have to use another tool on top of everything you're already using because like that's very counterintuitive to us to actually do that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a problem exists that is being solved with duct tape and bubble gum, and this is a better, more consistent and more repeatable, I guess, solution for these teams. You mentioned that you guys started the business, like 2-ish years ago. Maybe talk us through your journey so far as a company and maybe where, obviously you started as a startup and kind of a side hustle. And then, where are you now? Like how many people do you have, whether employees or contract resources, et cetera? I'm just kind of curious about scale.
Yeah. I mean, when we started out, it was just Kendra and me and then our tech lead that's also still with us. And then now we're 5. So we also have our lead data engineer. She is building out all of our like in-house NLP and like knowledge graphs and all of the like smart stuff. And then we have another full stack developer that has been hard working on everything Salesforce because Salesforce alone is a total nightmare. So that's sort of where the team is now. So 3 engineers and then Kendra and me that sort of are split between the go-to-market sales and product roadmap stuff.
We're recording this kind of mid-April 2025. We're kind of in peak kind of tariff talk and all of that, I guess. As a startup founder and co-founder, how is that impacting your company and kind of the decisions that you're making? But also, like, what are you hearing from like customers?
Yeah, I think in terms of like for us as a company, we've always been very like cost conscious. Like we're pretty cost efficient, both in terms of like our infrastructure, but also as like a team. And we've gotten a lot done with a small team. Obviously now we're in the midst of like raising and closing out a round, and we've consciously focused it on giving us enough time to see this through. I think from like a business perspective, it's really volatile, right? Like you had companies pull back, restructure, wanting cut tools, consolidate tools, try to build out a bunch of AI stuff in-house, kind of failed to do that for various reasons. And then now with the Shopify CEO's memo on AI is no longer optional, now all of the companies are like, oh crap, we really need to like actually lean into this. And I think there was still a little bit of this pause on what can AI actually do. And a lot of companies sort of got burned on how inaccurate and actually not that helpful it was. And I think now there's more of this like, oh, okay, there's something there, and a lot of assessing of like, what do we do in house versus partner with build. So this has actually benefited us because I think companies are looking for efficiencies as they're restructuring teams, as they're sort of like trying to automate away this sort of like admin overhead, as they're also trying to make better business decisions, right? Because right now we need to do more with less people, but we still have all this stuff that we're bogged down by. So I think that really benefited us, like especially after the Shopify's note. I think our like inbounds went up pretty significantly, but we're also aware that anything can change at any time. And I think obviously as a startup, you always go through like ebbs and flows. And I think we're sort of like preparing for these things in the back of our minds. Like if the worst thing possible happens, what do we do? But also like timing is so important. Right now, there's actually good timing that can be completely different in 2 weeks from now. You know, we fortunately work mostly with B2B businesses, not consumer businesses, which have a lot harder with the tariff stuff. Yeah. But I think every company right now is cost conscious, but I think we're actually helping them with the cost consciousness and how we're able to, you know, scale existing teams, make better decisions, etc. So, but yeah, it is very uncertain times. It's really hard to know where it'll be in 2 weeks and 4 weeks and 6 weeks. And a lot of things I think for people were unexpected. I was talking to one of our investors last year because I was like, I feel like we should raise this round like in the fall, not in the new year, because with the administration changing, we just don't know what to expect. And I think a lot of VCs thought this would actually be good for startups.
Yep.
I didn't feel that way. And I think I was right, because even funds are scaling back on raising their funds because people are hesitant to invest, whether it's like LPs, right, which are just individuals investing. It's like an angel investor, right? Just different structure. There's a lot of hesitancy that I think people sort of didn't have that much. Some people did, but other people didn't have foresight on, where they really thought it would actually benefit startups, also around regulations. And you saw big tech people make certain decisions, hoping that it would benefit them. And I think it hasn't played out that way. So I think there's still a lot of things that are unknown. But from the AI front, I think people are finally realizing what it can do, how to buy it and how to use it, what to look for and how to assess it. And I think that is just stuff that we figured out in the last, like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, where I think there is more understanding there now, which is positive for us, good thing for us.
Yeah, I think a lot of the comments you just made are very like kind of poignant and accurate, because I've talked to a lot of private equity and VC groups, and you know, coming out of last year, they were very excited about Q1, Q2 of 25 because the previous, call it 18 months, were super low from a deal volume perspective, and people were ready to get back to, you know, buying businesses, selling businesses, et cetera. And, you know, it hasn't been this, you know, kind of rapid pace that they maybe anticipated, and then throw the tariff uncertainty in the mix, then you know, what kills deals the most is uncertainty of what's going to happen. You know, if you have a little bit of clearing line of sight into the future and what you maybe expect, it's easier to, you know, underwrite a deal that you're going to buy versus, you know, not sure what's going to happen tomorrow kind of thing. So yeah, we're definitely living in very interesting times, and have been, I think, for the last like 5 years coming out of COVID.
It's been sort of nonstop. I think every startup funder right now needs a plan A, B, C, D. Like keep going, basically.
Yeah.
Because like I think right now the traditional way of doing things isn't working, and in some ways I think it's good. I think we're also like forced to disrupt certain ways we've operated as a startup ecosystem, especially sort of like the growth at all costs, raise so much money and have giant teams, which obviously got punished already. And I think now we're actually being a lot more conscious on how we're building startups, but I still think we're at this, we're figuring it out step. So I think for a lot of startups now, it'll be a little bit of this, like, maybe if they had X, Y, and Z more time, they could have actually done it. But because they're overlapping with this, we're kind of figuring out what's happening here. They might not be given the opportunity. For us, I planned for this like in like April last year. I planned for 2025. I planned for sort of like the worst. And there's still things that surprise me where I'm like, didn't see that coming. So there's still things there, but I think right now teams need like plan ABCs, really conscious with money, really careful with money. And I think the good thing is that we can do a lot more with way fewer people now. And in a way, it ensures product focus. At least that's what it did for us. We had a fund last year tell us we should raise $5 million and hire a sales team. I was like, what? Like, we're still figuring out product market fit. Like, what are they going to sell? What are they going to scale? Seems like, and I actually know a founder that has done that, and now they're out of money again, and they still don't have revenue.
Trying to get the customers to
Exactly.
tell them what they need, kind of thing.
Exactly, and then really didn't get anywhere. Meanwhile, we're here beating our competitors on accuracy that raised $350 million, grew a giant team, and we're a team of 5, raised $700,000, and we have a better product than them. And I think it was because we had such a focused way of operating and working with prospects and customers that really made sure we're actually understanding the product, make sure it works and that it creates value, and that we had really rapid iteration cycles as well, but that we're like so tied to customer input. So I think for us, the decision to raise less money, have a smaller team, but be extremely focused really benefited us at this point in time. Because when people onboard, there is no, oh, this isn't accurate, or, oh, this is weird, oh, this is hallucinating, where we immediately break trust. And I think that benefited us. And, we'll obviously see. Again, there's so many things that are unpredictable, but at least like that's what we're feeling right now.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of, with uncertainty causes a lot of people to kind of bootstrap. And I think because you've already been bootstrapping and not overextending, I think that's, probably the best way to be approaching it. And it sounds like you guys are on the right track and on the right path. And I'm excited to maybe have you on a year from now and hear about all the amazing success you and the team have had. And, we'll kind of do, we'll kind of converse about what changed in the last 12 months. But I guess to kind of round this out, because I really appreciate your time and I appreciate your kind of journey, kind of going from being that kind of normal employee to then taking the plunge and jumping into entrepreneurship. It's always like I said at the beginning, I always like to find out and understand people's origin stories. So thank you for that. As we round this out, I'll ask you the same kind of 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So first question, give me an influential business book or podcast that you would recommend.
I think for like a business podcast, for me, it's Lenny's podcast. I think he just always has such a unique lens on product and brings in really interesting product leaders. So I feel like I always have good takeaways from what's in the podcast. But I think one of the most impactful books, which actually has nothing to do with business, well, I don't know, is The Alchemist, because I actually read that book every year.
Okay.
Because I think it's like such a good, like, journeys aren't linear, and like you shouldn't look at life that way, because then you'll be disappointed and sort of just letting things come to you. And I actually think my career really reflects that, because I never would have thought I'd run a business. I never would have thought I would make it from an SDR to a C-suite executive within 8 years at a tech companies. I never even thought I could be in tech. Like where I grew up, you work in insurance and then you get married and you have children and that's life. Like there's so many things. I never thought I would live in New York. Like I still sometimes cross the Brooklyn Bridge and I'm like, yo, I live in New York. That's crazy. And I've been here for 8 years now. I come from a village with 300 people. So I think The Alchemist is like a way to look differently at every part of life, whether it's life, work, relationships. And I think it's such a quick read, but it's such a unique book that just gives me, every time I read it, every year I read it, gives me a different perspective in the moment of time that I'm in. which is different every year. Yeah. And I think it's just such a good like reframe of mind. So not directly business related, but I think like a principle that I adapted in life of, especially if somebody that's more risk averse, I'm very much like, I let things come to me and I lean into them as they come to me. And I have a trust in those things. I still like, obviously, control certain things as well and like do certain things. But I think sometimes you just need to listen and like trust. And I think in times it can be hard, especially in times like right now where a lot of people are struggling. It's hard to do that. So The Alchemist grounds me. So yeah, I should probably read it,
but I haven't read it yet, so I'll have to add it to my list here. So very cool. The second question: what's your favorite thing to do outside of work?
My favorite thing to do outside of work, anything nature. I volunteer at the Botanic Gardens, and we teach the kids about botany and birds and stuff. And it's just, I always learn something volunteering there. I have many facts now about birds and bats and flowers and strawberries. I don't know. And the kids always teach you something. I think it's another thing where I'm like, it's a great reset because kids are so full of wonder and full of questions and not so jaded. So I think it's just always like a good reset for me where, obviously, you know, as a startup founder, your life's oftentimes like a to-do list and it gets really tiring and you're sometimes just so over it. And then you have a kid at the strawberry stand that's so fascinated by the strawberry. You're like, this is incredible. So that's, I think my favorite thing is like volunteering at the Botanic Gardens and anything nature. But I think that connection between the two is...
No, that's awesome. Yeah, sometimes you need to step out of the to-do list and you know, be around other people that are not solving complex problems.
Yes.
Last question here. What's your favorite vacation spot if you do have the time to go spend some time on vacation?
Yeah, I haven't done it in a while, but I don't want to say the exact spot because it still doesn't have that much tourism.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, but it's in Costa Rica, and it's I used to do a yoga and surf retreat there every year at the end of the year as like a way to just disconnect, because like you literally are disconnected where that is. Like also because if you're surfing, you're in the water, you don't have your phone, nothing. So it's like a really good reset. But yeah, it got a little touched by tour. It changed a lot over the years that I've been there, but Costa Rica is a great spot. The people are lovely. The food is amazing. The nature is incredible. You have the jungle, you have the mountains, you have volcanoes, you have the ocean, you have great cities. It's just, I love Costa Rica. So I would say that's my favorite.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, that's Costa Rica is on our list to explore. We have not ventured down there yet, unfortunately. But Larissa, it's been awesome to get to know you a little bit more, and appreciate you sharing your story. If people want to learn more about you and your journey, or about Joyn, like what's kind of the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, I don't have any social media except LinkedIn, so that's the way to go. So it's just Larissa Licha, Licha. And then Larissa@joyn.one is my email address. Yes, but to see our company, it's like joyn.one. Like that's where you can see our website, and you know we're also on LinkedIn, obviously as a company as well. And it's JOYN because we're bringing the joy back into work by joining things. It just works as a name. Yeah, it's a thing.
Brilliant.
That's how we got there.
No, I wasn't sure how that all worked out, but no, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Well, we'll put all this stuff in the show notes so people can have quick, easy access to everything. Larissa, it's been awesome to chat with you. Thank you very much for being on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.